Perfect. I think we're live. So, hey, I hope this all went well and we're live streaming now. Daniel, thanks a lot for joining me here today, taking the
No
time,
worries.
waking up early.
You got me. Yeah, you got me bright and early. I was checking my. I think we're good.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. I know we're a couple hours apart, but that's not gonna be a difficulty. So yeah, actually, I want to use today pre-grind. Like I'm gonna start grinding. Unfortunately, you can't, but I want to use this opportunity to announce that we as Poker Code and myself, we're going to partner with GG. We shared it. We shared it with some people already, but I'm going to become an ambassador as well, looking into their business as well and how they structure their poker side. And I'm really curious about their plans because they're quite different to what a lot of other players do. And I mean, you're a representative and an ambassador as well. So I'm really curious to hear your opinion and your experience so far as well with GG. What do you think about it?
Well, first and foremost, let me just say, like, I'm super excited. You know, when I heard they were speaking to Fedor Holtz, I was like, my goodness, I can be on the same team of him and I don't have to deal with all these freaking crazy check raises and bets and these awful spots you put me in the high road, which drive me insane. God, I hate playing with Fedor Holtz. It's no fun, people. Trust me. But I guess it will be a lot of fun, you know, if he's playing on GG Poker. And I know with Poker Code, you teaching some of your secrets is pretty valuable for a lot of people who want to be able to do what you do. And not saying that, you know, they'll be able to play as well as you, but understanding how I'm curious to do it myself, because I'm curious to see sort of what methods you use to get so good. As far as GG Poker, I've been super happy with the momentum that they've built, you know. Before I came on, you know, the first GG series, I think there was a 3 million total guarantee. And we're talking about, for this next month, 100 million in guarantees, partnering with the World Series of Poker circuit events, another one of my sort of favorite brands. Like it's when I do the most grinding in that 6 weeks of World Series. I know you don't play stud 8 and triple draw because we discussed maybe playing heads up and you were like, nah, I'm not playing those games. But I like that there's all the games there as well. So it's been great, you know, seeing you come on board and them signing with the, you know, WSOP. I'm super happy to be with GG.
I mean, this series coming up, when I've heard about that, this is absolute insanity. It's like 100 million guarantee. I think Scoop is like 85 million. So I looked at the schedule and the tournaments. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so they're really very aggressive. You know, when you look at like the first GG Masters, which was our sort of signature flagship event, in January, we said, okay, let's do a $250,000 guarantee because it's a $150 buy-in with no re-entry, right? So that's pretty significant when you don't have people rebuy. So we didn't hit the guarantee the first week, and they're like, let's kick it up. I'm like, you didn't hit the guarantee. Why are you kicking it up? I said, no, make it 300. Okay. So then we almost hit 300. They're like, make it 400. Okay, make it 500. So now that's a $500,000 guarantee. They've been very aggressive with growth, and it's all happening really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just insane how fast something like that can take off when the software is good and the games are good and it's fun to play. Like it can go really fast.
You know, I think you nailed it on the head with the software, right? Like 80% of our clientele, I know this was true when I came on, I don't know if it's still true, use mobile, right? So they're on the cell phone or they're on a laptop. And if you've played at various different sites, it's not as functional. But GG, it's very, very easy to use. The software, like especially mobile, is cutting edge. And it's a lot of fun, you know, like the whole point of, or just, I guess the whole aim of GG was to make the whole thing fun. So there's a whole bunch of little bells and whistles. Like I find myself enjoying playing when I'm able to, when I go to Toronto, just like being able to rabbit hunt. You know, you lay down the hand and you get to see what would have come. Squeezing my cards. As a mixed game player, squeezing is like a thing where you just, you know, there's actually strategy behind it. Yeah. So being able to do that on the software is just like a lot of fun.
I'm learning how to squeeze actually. Like this is the first time I'm actually learning how to like where to pull the card from and understand.
Well, I was going to teach you. So in triple draw, right? Or if you played no limit single draw, a lot of people squeeze and they use it to adjust their bluffing frequencies, right? Because if you squeeze a half of a card and you see that there's 3 dots, right? You know it's a 6, 7, or an 8. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, let's say the 7 pairs you, the 6 helps you, and the 8 helps you. So you're 67% to make the hand. So if you think bluffing 33% is appropriate, you don't look at the rest of the card and just bet. You won't be giving off any physical tells because you're like, I don't know if I'm bluffing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Juwanda taught me that, of course.
Yeah, I actually the only mixed game that I played that I actually really liked was No Limit Draw.
Yep.
Oh man, that game is super fun.
It's a pure poker game, right? What is there to it? It's like there's not a lot of math or anything. It's just like, does he have it or does he? Like, this is pure as you can get.
Yeah, especially I think it's one of these games where obviously if you play it for thousands of hours, it gets kind of boring. But the first time when everyone's getting into it and you can see how players are adapting like these tiny little strategies and find their own kind of thing. I love that process.
Oh no, for sure. I love learning any new games, and that's one of the newer ones that I learned. But it's an old school game. It's been around for forever. They used to play it for really high stakes, and they still do. You know, it's in the mix that I play regularly at Bobby's room. It's one of the 11 games, and they play with a cap, which kind of takes something away from it. Yeah, cap is like 40, and they play 40 big blind cap. So you're just like, whee, ship it.
What you've been grinding the WSOP for probably more than I've been alive.
Thanks.
How do you generally prepare for it? Like now, I mean, obviously online is different to live, but what tips would you give people out there right now who basically have these crazy schedules ahead of them? Like, what would you suggest?
Well, so for the World Series of Poker, you're absolutely right. You know, that's where I spend 6-7 weeks where I'm playing every day, 12 to 14 hours a day. So usually around the 4 or 5 week mark, fatigue will set in, right? So what I try to do is in May, before that, is I don't play much poker at all. I study very little. Like I may watch a few, streams here and there, something like that. But mostly it's all about getting my physical body in shape. So, I mean, I'll do some like walking meditation outside. I'll, really make sure that I'm sleeping well, eating well, getting physically fit. Because another thing that happens to the World Series, most people get sick. When you're putting your body through such strain and not getting enough sleep, and being around other people and germs, it affects your immune system. So everyone ends up with a little bit of the sniffles. So I try to give myself the best opportunity to, deal with that because I know it's inevitable. But the more in shape that I am, the better. So for an online grind, right, I would imagine it's similar. The only difference is you get to be at the comfort of your own home. But I would imagine, and you'd know better, that it's important to get some form of exercise, like at least something. Yeah.
The hardest part for me is actually I've realized that now more than earlier is the sleep schedule. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with the 8, 10, 12 hours of focus. But it's this repetitive sleep deprivation or just this weird cycle of like especially nowadays tournaments became longer and you play like I tweeted about that 5 years ago when I played online. It was either you run terrible and you bust at 1:30 and you can go to bed, or you have a deep run and then you win the big tournament and it's like 3:30, 4 a.m. Now I played until 6:30 a.m. and then I bubbled some tournament, or I made day 2 in some tournaments, and it's crazy how much more intense and time intense the schedule has become. It's really a different environment now.
Yeah, I would say that's a big thing that you pointed to, because the World Series of Poker also, they typically, the live events, they have a starting flight at 11 a.m. and they have one at 3 p.m. So there are some times where I'm going to play the 11 a.m. as well, mostly the 3 p.m. schedule. But sometimes if I'm playing till 3, I get done at 3 a.m., have to go home, sleep, get up, have breakfast, and come back for the 11 a.m. event. So if you're doing that, and then if you bust that, well, there's the 3 p.m. So constantly doing that, your body having to readjust to sleep schedules. It's something to think about, I'm always a planner, so I'm glad you asked this question, because I like to think ahead to what problems that may arise rather than go, oops, what do I do now? So I've been around the World Series grind, as you mentioned, longer than you've been alive, maybe. So I've got the hang of it.
Actually, a pretty totally other direction, but something that I always want to ask you is when because my background is more online, and I think your background, as far as I know, is more from the live side, or you've played a lot more live. And so how was it for you seeing these different eras of players, or groups of players come along? Like, for me, I'm experiencing that now the first time, but like, especially when it was, 214, 215, when like the Germans, how they've been called by others, came on. Like, how was that for you from the outside?
So that's a really important question too, because I think if a lot of people remember the golden era of poker, right around 2004-ish, right? There was a lot of big names then, and many of them are no longer playing in high stakes events, and very few outside of like Eric Seidel. You don't really see them on the tour. And I think one of the main reasons for that is a lack of respect for a younger generation who is learning more, learning faster, learning to play better. Like when I was 21, 22, much like you, I came in there and I'm like, these guys all suck. They're so bad. I'm just crushing them, right? So one of the things that I've always done is I check my game, every 6 months to a year, and I learn from the younger generation. So I try to learn, like, what is Fedor doing that's working? Like, why is he opening Jack 7, like, for middle position all the time? Or, whatever the case may be. So I've always found that it's really important to sort of be self-aware, and instead of poo-pooing what they're doing, be like, these kids, they don't know better. Actually try to learn it and understand. I remember the first time Stefan Sondheimer was having a conversation with Corey, and he mentioned combinations. Like, what the hell is that? We never thought about poker in combinations. He's like, well, you don't have many combos of queen 10. I'm like, what is a combo of queen 10? And it was like a light bulb went off. I'm like, I must know like nothing in terms of how they learn.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think a big part is also that partly they're right, because when we started playing, we were not that great. Like when I remember when I played my first live tournament, they were very partly right that I'm not that good. I was very nervous, made a lot of mistakes, like didn't really know the landscape. But I think, yeah, what you said is very true. Is if you keep ignoring that, if you stick to that mindset and say like, okay, so if he's not good now, then he will never be good, then probably at some point it's going to change.
So you just reminded me of one of the first times I played poker with you, and I witnessed one of the most amazing hands I've ever seen in my entire life to this day. Fedor Holtz against this kid, Upek Silva, I think his name is, right?
Yes.
It was the most amazing hand I've ever seen in my life. The board ran out something like ace, queen, jack, 9, 8 with 3 diamonds. So, and he had, his opponent has ace, king. Fedor goes all in on the river. This kid tanks for 10 minutes. And I realized it was a very big moment. Normally I would call clock a little earlier, but I'm like, okay, it's been 10 minutes. I have to call the clock. I call the clock after a minute, and he has ace king. This is an easy fold. You beat nothing. It was a 3-bet pot. There's no possible way you could ever call here. He makes a horrible call and raked all the chips because Fedor had you had 6-8 suited, I think. You turned the bottom pair into a bluff.
I think it was either the board included a 7 and had 6-7 suited, or it was 7-8 suited. I wouldn't call 6-8.
I think it was 7-8 suited. Yeah, you had 7-8 suited. Now I want to know, is that a bluff? Like, because you were very young then, right? Considering it was the main event, and where you were at and the quality of play, is that a bluff you would make today? In that same spot.
I think, I don't remember the exact deepness, but I might fold pre actually.
We had position too.
Yeah, I was in position. He 3-bet the big blind, but he made it kind of big, and we weren't so deep. So I think in the softness of the field, it's probably fine to fold there, even though in other fields I would always call. So I think first pre, then on the flop, I think given his sizing, a call was pretty standard. And then on the turn, that's the trickiest spot, right? Like, do I start bluffing my hand or not? I think after he checks the turn, I think it has a very high EV to continue betting turn and river, to be honest. And I think on that river, I'm always all in. Like, he has ace king so often, and he can not really call.
Well, he did.
So it's weird. These hands are so weird especially when I look at some hands we played like years ago. It's very different nowadays. Yeah.
I think you being Fedor Holtz affected his mind. I really do. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, sometimes people do that, where they just
Oh,
lose their mind and call because because they know that you're nuts and they think that, well, maybe he's bluffing.
I was on the better side of that so many times. I think that was the thing that a lot of players discounted when they looked at how I played. Is, yeah, of course, people, they did some really crazy things against me, but they did these crazy things in favor of me very, very often too. So
Yeah.
when he calls ace king there and I have a 10 or a flush or a set, like, that's then just punting it off with ace
No,
king.
I was thinking, like, as I was watching the hand, and after that, I spent a lot of time thinking about this hand because I found it fascinating. I'm thinking, like, I was trying to think of like how he arrived at a call, right? And then I went through that little exercise of counting combos, and I counted the combos, and there wasn't there was not enough bluff combos at all in this equation. And I wonder just how he got there. But really, I mean, it had to be really frustrating for you
I
being so
think
close.
oh, of course. I mean, I think the more frustrating part was to bust 25th. But it's like this main event. It's just I've never been so emotionally about poker. Not never. Like, I don't think so. It was as if this was, I think, the craziest time where I could really feel the edge. It wasn't like, oh, questioning, like, okay, am I winning in this field, or like, it was really people were doing things. It was insane. Like, everyone was playing so cautious and tight and didn't want to make mistakes. And then you had 2 or 3 players left who kind of knew what they were doing. It was really, really crazy how this field played. Like, it was an experience I never had again, I think.
That was because we were both deep. I came 11th, I believe, that year. That
I
would have been
know.
fun if we both made the final table. It was November 9 days. Like, I ended up just bubbling, and I agree with you in terms of the emotion and just the atmosphere and the lights and the cameras for a lot of people.
Insane.
And I've been under the lights and cameras my whole career, but this is different. The Thunderdome, when it's rocking, it's the main event. My blood was pumping when I was all in against Joe McKeon. Like, I couldn't stand still. It was just it's such an that's what we play for, like those awesome opportunities.
Yeah, it's just there's this thing about poker. I don't know, it's so weird. I can't explain it, but this excitement, that's why I never really enjoyed cash games so much. I liked it, and sometimes I like, especially if there's a challenge and if it was fun, like I did enjoy it. But tournaments, like this thrill that you're describing, it's just one of a kind.
You reminds me when I started my career as a teenager, way back before you were born. What I used to do is, and I agree with you, like, I would play cash games, and that was my job, right? Was playing limit hold'em. I'd go to work noon to 8, do my job. Then at night, I would go for the entertainment and play a tournament at one of the private clubs, right? Because tournaments, for those that, I mean, maybe you disagree, but actually, well, with online, it's a lot easier. Back in my day, it was very difficult to build a bankroll playing tournaments consistently. You didn't have enough of them to play. You couldn't play online. So, you're taking really big risks if you're just hoping to bink, and that's how you're paying your bills. So it was important and really required to play cash games first. And I looked at tournaments as kind of a treat where, maybe if you hit, you elevate your bankroll and you can play higher stakes. But really, without cash games, you couldn't be a professional tournament player all that successfully back in my day.
I think it really depends on the edge. Like, some tournaments, I feel, if you have, like, some of these WSOP events, you just have an RI bigger than 100%, and the variance is not going to be that crazy. Like, I think you're going to be a winning player over a year, like, very, very, very often. So if you're less winning, like if you look at these super high rollers, man, the variance is absolutely crazy. So really depends. Obviously less players, so that reduces it a bit. But if you play with 5 to 15% edges, you're going to see way different results in terms of variance.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate that, especially the roller scene, right? You're talking about 40 guys, right? There's a lot of good players in there, right? Some maybe a little better than others for sure. But overall, I mean, there's just a lot of luck in spots where there's 14 left and someone has 9s, the other one has ace king, right? And if you're running above, like Chidwick did for, like, everyone has had their run. You won everything for a while. It was like, it's just, there's always going to be that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean necessarily that somebody who, isn't winning isn't playing well a lot of the time. Over the long haul, we can look at a sample and say, all right, if you're not beating these after 5 years, you're probably not a favorite. And it's still not even necessarily true. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think it's so compounding too, because I've realized that too, is when, if you look at these super tough tournaments, you're always in doubt, kind of. You're always in doubt of, do I beat them? Because you never will play the sample. You never will play 5,000 super hurlers. But when you play these tournaments where you really feel, where you're quite certain you have an edge, and obviously you don't know how big it is, but you're in the top, whatever, 3% of players, like, this is such a different feeling. It just feel like, for me, it was always a nice feeling to be able to crush tournaments.
Yeah, you just described like the first 15 years of my career.
Yeah, I would really love to see some of this old school play, like, cards up. I would really love to see what people were playing in like 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like, this would be
even more. Yeah, like, they actually have some archived hands of like when Stu Unger was playing the World Series. And I've watched a lot of the old videos. The sizing is what I found the funniest. Like, in around 2003, 2004, I was one of the first people to develop like a smaller opening size. Because back then, say the blinds were 100, 200, right? Under the gun makes it 1,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. The 3-better on the button makes it 5,000. Then the under the gun player makes it 20,000 all in, right? Now it would be 400, 1,100, 2,100, 3,700. It's completely changed, especially with bet sizing. And the other thing too, that I mean, basically there's a lot of stuff that you guys figured out mathematically that I sort of knew intuitively. One of those was lower raise sizes makes a lot more sense. And also defending your big line. Like, it was so easy to play back then, because it was a simple mathematical formula I figured out, right? Okay, 4 and 800 with a $100 ante, that's $2,100. If I make it 2,000 every single hand, okay, 50% of the time they go all in, and 50% of the time they just fold, I win $100 every time. And every once in a while, maybe I'll wake up with aces or kings. So that was really the strategy that I developed, was just open a lot more pots. People were folding 7-8 offsuit in the big blind, like hands that are way too good to be folding to a min raise. And then when they 3-bet or showed any resistance, I was just like, okay, take it. It was very, 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 very easy form of poker back then.
It was actually, I think that's a good point, is that these I think the biggest difference I observed is also even just like 10 to 5 years ago, was this thing that nobody really wanted to play post flop. In all, like, if you get 3-bet, nobody was calling. If you get 4-bet, nobody was calling. If you get open rate, nobody was flatting in position. Nobody was defending that big blind. It was just this whole thing of, hey, you have so many hands that actually want to see a flop, a turn, and river, like folding their queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, like all the time. Or these clicking battles with like rag aces that happen all the time.
Yeah. I remember a commentator, and I won't name him, but like, they used to drive me nuts. There was a few. They'd be commentating on the poker, and they're like, well, he's got to move in or fold here. And I'm like, the correct answer is call. Like, most often when they would say all in or fold situation, I would look at it and go, that is a call, always. Yeah,
it's very interesting how poker has changed. And I think it's showcasing how we're constantly overestimating the certainty, or like how good we are, how much we've solved it. And then we're realizing, hey, this is actually much more complicated game than we think it is. There's a lot.
I think you bring up a good point, right? Because like a lot of people that are new to poker or just getting into it, they're a little bit afraid of the fact, like, well, it's all solved. Everybody's using these solvers, so everyone's playing GTO. And like, the truth is, no human being playing live poker is physically capable or mentally capable of playing absolute game theory optimal poker. You can play JTO like, right? You can sort of get, you can try to like randomize your frequencies and spots to make yourself less exploitable, but you're never going to be perfect. So everyone's going to have tendencies. So I think it's safe. I think poker is, at least live, is safe for a very long time in it being a game of wits, where you have to just outthink the person. Yeah.
Totally agree. I think it's also the human side that plays such a big role, is about, even though people are pretty good at the theory, is like, okay, to actually be able to constantly deliver it is another side of it. You know, it's just if you're good or if you're smart. I mean, I realized that in the beginning when I played my first super high rollers, I was like I was so taken away by the results and the variance and so on. It was like, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't deliver that. And then with experience and time, I got better at it. So that's also a big, big part is your mindset.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's one thing like having all the knowledge and then being able to execute it all. Like there's a couple, and I won't. Yeah, there's a couple players I know who study really, really hard, and they study everything really hard. But when they sit at a high roller and they're considered winning players, I really enjoy them at my table.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, I like playing with this guy. Yet he's studies hard. So it's a question of also too, how are you studying? What are you studying? Is what you're studying even applicable? And are you doing it the right way? Like when I first I worked with a couple of guys, and they were showing me what this whole PO solver thing. I didn't understand it at all. I was so intimidated that like 30 minutes in to the sort of the coaching, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I can get it. But then my brain clicked and I started to get it and I started to roll with it. I'm like, I see now. And, it became helpful. I think it's important to whatever level you're at, right? The game's more fun when you win, or at least when you're improving. So even if you're not very good now, the process of learning and getting better, it's like, I don't know, for me, that's one of the more enjoyable things in life is getting better at stuff.
I can resonate with that. Who are the toughest players you played against in your different stages of your life?
Well, I mean, you're definitely on that list. You and Stefan, actually. Stefan Sonheimer was one who, he's like single-handedly one of the reasons I went into the lab. Because it was like a Poker Masters that I think he won the Poker Masters, and he outplayed me in 3 or 4 key spots so badly that I was like, whoa. I was, I might have been a little unlucky, but I got totally outplayed in these hands. He was bluffing me. When he would bluff me, I'd fold. When he'd value bet, I'd call. It was like just ridiculous. So Stefan was definitely, I found like one of the tougher ones, but so many really good players, I think, in the high rollers circuit. Hard to think of who more so. You definitely, because you're very active. At least from what I remember when we played, you were very active. You're opening a lot of pots. So there's a lot of spots where, I would want to open a hand. Fedor got there first. So the question is, do I 3-bet Fedor or just let him go? So I found that, it was a thorn in my side.
Sometimes he did 3-bet me. I do remember these times.
Yeah. Whenever I had aces, kings, or queens.
No, I didn't say 4-bet. I said 3-bet.
Yeah. Actually, after I got some coaching, I remember one hand specifically, and you folded. One hand specifically where I did 3-bet you, where you raised the button, and I was in the big blind with Jack 10 suited, and I 3-bet you. You called, and it came ace queen 8 with like two of my suit. So I bet
flop.
Yeah. So I bet quarter pot. I just bet quarter pot. You called, and the turn was like a 6, an off card. I checked. You bet, I think, around half pot or so, or in the neighborhood. I don't remember exactly. And I jammed all in. And you like looked annoyed and frustrated, and you folded. And I was like, phew. So that's my bluff when I had 8,000 outs.
I'm glad you remember this hand.
Yeah,
it's
the one time.
Yeah, it's man, there's definitely some really fun memories of battling. For sure. Also, sometimes have taken it too serious.
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed about you too. Is like I remember once in Monte Carlo, like I was like, oh, he is human, because you're this young kind of like for a lot of guys robots, and you're like always in the zone or whatever. But I remember like a hand where you got really frustrated, and you were like, ugh, and I'm like, I do that. I feel those emotions. It's good to see that some of the young geniuses also are emotional.
I think for me it was in between this thing of wanting to play very well, and playing very well in poker include or live poker included a lot of this composure for me, because I didn't want to give away tells to other players and pick up as much as possible. And then obviously the emotional inside, like what's constantly going on of self-doubt and like obviously also like any form of frustration and tilt and so on that comes up is like it can be intense, and especially when I was suppressing at the same time, like this build up, this tension of like, okay, I want to be so composed to the outside, but then in the inside something is going on. So this was difficult at times.
So you worked with Elliot Rowe, as far as I know, in poker and all that stuff. So like, so was that around the time when you decided like it was important to do something about it, that you sort of enhance it? And then like, what was that experience like for you?
It was a bit different trigger. So when I worked with Elliot, it was more, I had a pretty long downswing, but on the outside, it looked like I was crushing. So I think I was probably, of all my years, this was probably skill-wise my best year. I think I was doing things that nobody at that time was really, or not many players were really considering. And with the people you also know that I worked together with, like the German crew, I think we were very far ahead of a lot of players, and I wasn't really able to convert it into success, or at least financial success as well. And I lost a lot of money in that year. So I lost about 40% or 50% of my bankroll, and everyone thought I was just, skyrocketing up. And it was very frustrating because I didn't feel like I could really share it. And so I was like, okay, I just gotta, dig deeper. And then after 11 or 12 months, I was like, okay, I'm done. I can't. This was like 2015. And this was when I started working with Elliot. I was like, okay, hey, Elliot, I just want to focus on having more fun and making good decisions rather than just, being frustrated every time I lose a tournament, because then this is going to be a terrible experience. And that was when it all started.
So do you feel like you're one of those people that puts just like an insanely unfair amount of pressure on yourself?
I have very high expectation, but I'm not so strong in the discipline department. So I can really tell that I'm not the person like, just telling to myself, oh, I'm going to do this for the next 3 years, and then I just follow that plan. I can really tell that I'm suffering if I try to force me to do that. It's more, I think I'm really good when I do something out of just passion, and I really enjoy this. I enjoy learning about the game. Like, this was my strongest time, I think. And then I could tell that in 2015, 2016, after I've really, obviously I had my biggest success, but also I could feel like, hey, wow, I'm not really getting better. I'm not really learning. I was just, executing. And it was really draining. I was done with Vegas and I was like, leave me alone. I don't want to see this game anymore for some time.
Yeah, I remember that phase. And I also wondered too, if you experienced something that I did early on, and probably right around a similar age. It was like when I was winning everything. There were points where, I put in the work, I won the tournament, and the feeling that I had for the next week wasn't a feeling of like happiness necessarily. I was more like, I wouldn't say depressed necessarily, but I was like, there's just not a lot of meaning in this. It felt as though, okay, so I made this money. Like, what do I do with it now? And I remember exactly in the year 2000, when I made my first big score and I had good money. And I'm like, for the last 4 years, I've been grinding every day to make this money. Now I have it, right? And I didn't have any other foundation. So what am I going to do? Well, let's blow it all. Because if I blow it all, now I have purpose again, right? And my purpose is to build a bankroll. So I spent the year drinking and playing and, being silly. And it was a very, important lesson for me. And I wonder for you, if you've had similar feelings of emptiness, if you will, surrounding like post-victory, which seems like the time you should be super happy.
I think it was a very similar experience for me, where I built up so much expectation around this point when I finally reached this point. So whatever this point is, but for me back then, it was a goal that I wanted. It was like, okay, if I make $1 million this year, and then I had this crazy year in 2016, and I was, I surpassed that by a mile, and it was, wow, this does not feel at all like I thought it would be. And I think this, because I put so much expectation in this, is like, if I just push hard enough, if I just work hard enough, if I just put enough energy in it, then, at the end of this, there's going to be rainbow and all flowers and great. But it was just like, hey, it's just, the same thing. It's not so much different. So
yeah, I always tell people when I do whatever coaching or whatever, or talking to people, like when they say things like, when I say, well, what's your goal? It's like, my goal is to make a lot of money, right? I'm like, okay, so money's a tool, right? What do you want it for? Like, what is this money going to do for you? Like, just having a pile of it, like, what is it that you want? What kind of life do you want to have? Is it freedom? Is it travel? Whatever. And then focus on like a deeper vision. So you have like a deeper, meaning behind it. Like I remember seeing guys that were older than me at the time, Huck Seed and Lee Salem, they were always doing that. They were playing like 20, 40 limits, grind, grind, grind. And now they're playing 1 to 2,000. And now they're just being sloppy and drinking and whatever. And then 2 weeks later, they're like asking to borrow money to play 20, 40 again. And I saw that pattern with a lot of people. And I was like, ultimately, I wonder if it's just because they have no other deeper meaning or vision or focus that is important to them that they're, making this money for.
Yeah, I guess. I guess it's difficult when there's so much expectation towards this thing that might just be, a fun game to play. When it has to be much more than that, I think it's difficult. So
I've noticed you've been doing a lot more. It seems like, just from looking at your social media, you've been definitely focusing on like, being outward focused and, being like sort of a role model, if you will, for a lot of people in your generation with, sort of positive message and things like that. Is that something that you work with Elliot, or is it something that's expanded since then?
I think I'm also, I personally don't consider myself a role model. I'm just also I feel I'm as much someone trying to find my way or my path as other people around me. I've realized in the process of poker that, I really enjoy learning, and I enjoy a lot more simple things than what I thought I did. I think that's a big difference. So I thought, it would be all just about being successful and making a lot of money. It was like, oh, once I've achieved that, then that's the end goal or the direction. And then I've experienced that, and then I was like, hey, wait a second. Actually, the thing, like the path, I enjoyed a lot more about learning how to get there, or like the learning process. And so once I've realized that, I think a pretty big change in my life automatically happened, because I realized like, hey, well, okay, actually maybe just the learning part is the really enjoyable part for me. And then I started learning about new things and made that similar experience over and over again, because it's a really strong pattern in mine. It's like, okay, now I learned something new, then I, made a business out of it, and there's like, oh, wait a second, I just want to learn and build and like, learn, get to know new people and learn new things. And then this is kind of a repeating pattern right now, where I get closer and closer to an environment that I really enjoy, working with people on things that I find, just that I can grow with and that are enjoyable for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good recipe for our time right now, considering what's going on in the world. A lot of people, like, I've said this and people took it the wrong way, but it's like, it's just true. Whether I had money or not, I don't get bored. Like, I don't experience boredom as an emotion or a feeling or anything like that, because I've always found things to do. Like, especially in 2020, with the amount of resources we have, whether it's books, whether it's games, whether it's, personal, goals you can set up. I've always found it easy to, but part of that is because I'm, contrary to what popular belief would be, I'm very introverted. Like, I like staying home. The introvert doesn't mean socially awkward. A lot of people have that misconception. But I'm very comfortable in this sort of quarantine environment. Like, how have you been dealing with it? Have you been going out a lot, or you've been just sticking
online
to
poker?
Online poker, yeah.
No, actually, my quarantine experience has been pretty wild, because my life changed a lot. And first, it was a bit weird, because I was like, now this totally new environment, but now it's also very positive, because it makes me reconsider and rethink a lot of things in my life. Because some businesses don't go very well now because of the environment. Some go very well because of the digital adoption. So it's really like, this is one thing, and then obviously, like, me being at home all the time, me not being able to see a lot of people that I'd like to see, me not traveling, like, there's suddenly 80-90% of my life is just, like, heads up or totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you famously sort of, like, at a very early age, you retired from poker. Like, when you did that, like, what did that exactly mean to you in retire? Because I knew you said you were still going to play, but what did retirement mean to you?
For me back then, it was mainly, it was weird how this was such a thing. For me, it was mostly, hey guys, I go from playing 3,000-4,000 hours a year to playing I don't know how much and probably not much. And I'm gonna look for other things to do. This was kind of my idea when I said that. And I think in the last 3 years, I've been pretty consistent with that. I have not really played much. I played a couple live tournaments. I played the super hurlers and stayed in the game. And I probably studied more than I played. And that felt pretty good. And now I think that's a good transition because people have been asking about what the announcement is. So I can get back to that is when we built Poker Code last year, I just became more passionate about the whole learning process again, rather than so much about, it's just, I think I'm in a different life phase now. Like I'm not so much about, hey, I want to, compete and be the best there is and get up there. Like I don't really have that ambition anymore. Like I don't want to be the #1 player in the world. It's more like, hey, I want to have fun and I want to play obviously against tough opponents and get better and improve, but also that part of teaching others and helping them improve and building a community of people who really care about improving. Like this is really fun. It's really fun for me to see when other people are thriving. So I think that's the shift that has been happening in my life now.
So you brought up Poker Code, and I had a couple questions about that. So how exactly does the process work, right? So so it's obviously like a training site where you're teaching people how to play poker. Like, well, what's different about it? How does it set up? Like, I'd sign up on Poker Code. Okay, make me $1 million.
That's exactly how it works. That's the promise as well. If you don't, money back. No, but so in a nutshell, I'll give you the process, our development process. So first I had this idea in my mind. I always want to create a core, or like I wanted to pass on my way of thinking about the game, because first of all, I enjoy that challenge of compiling that. And then also people have constantly been asking me about, hey, how can I learn from you? Or what would you suggest me to read, or which video to watch? And I never really felt like to really be able to pass them someone like, hey, this is the place to go. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to create the Poker Code, because it was this idea of, hey, let me get together with the best player I know, who I think is one of the best players, if not the best player in the world, Matthias, and get his theoretical knowledge and my more adaptive, exploitative feeling. And I think this paired up very well. So that's when we created a course. And I was thinking like, hey, okay, people can buy the course and they can learn with it. But this is only one part. Like in that process, I realized, hey, wait a second. Not everyone learns like I do or like Matthias do. Like people learn totally different. And in the process of that, we've realized we want to take players or support players on that journey. Is we want to understand what they think, how they learn, what their individual approach to the game is, where they're at in their life. Because just watching a course isn't really going to get you further if you weren't able already, to learn or to get better. So there's something else that I think we try to offer our communities, to say like, hey, okay, we do weekly coachings with some of the best players in the world. You can post hands. We give you feedback to that. But also we know a lot of our people in the community, like personally, we know what their issues are, what levels they play, so this is a part that is, I think, very different in the Poker Code than it is in lots of other learning platforms, this personal individual approach. And that I had to learn myself as well, as like, hey, wow, wait a second, people aren't really learning if you don't accompany them on that journey.
No, that sounds really valuable and really makes a lot of sense, because you're absolutely right in terms of the way that, people learn. Like, I think of a friend of mine, very close friend who's mentored me, Jennifer Harmon, right? And if you were to listen to Jennifer Harmon talk about poker, you would think, she's like, not there. But then when you actually look at the decisions she makes and the way she plays, and I'm talking mostly mixed games here, she makes the right decisions. So the way in which she processes information is a lot different than others. So like, in order to be a good coach or to have a training site that's valuable, you have to customize it in some way for the student, right? And so it's interesting that you found that is valuable, that like not everyone thinks like Fedor Holtz. So
definitely not.
Right. Yeah.
And it's also a strength, because I'm learning. Like this was the reason why I became so good, is because I've learned from people that think very different to me. It's like, if you look at, you mentioned Stefan and me, we couldn't be more different in the way we think. You know, he's super good at math, like super good in school, very, very good at memorizing things. You know, it's not the guy you want to be playing at quiz pub, you know, like a pub quiz. Like he's just so, I would say he's very, very book smart, like very, very, very good understanding for all kinds of concepts, and just a smart guy. And I'm different. Like I don't memorize things so well, but like I have this intuition. Like I'm just a more emotional player, and I can memorize things roughly very well. And so this where I was pushing him to think more exploitatively and be more abstract in his thinking, he was pushing me to be more precise and more mathematical. And so this was a very great addition. I think we experienced the same thing again, where it's about every perspective is valuable in some way, because you understand better how other people think about the game, and that is valuable for a very good player, but also an amateur or someone who wants to improve.
I might be biased here, but I'm going to say that like your way is way more fun, right? I mean, it really is. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like poker's more fun when you need to figure out the spot in the spot rather than study a set of situations, say, okay, here I'm going to bet 33%, you know, randomize, do exactly that. And it feels almost like the decisions are out of your hands, if you will, where just like the randomization. And I know, like, I remember the first time I saw someone do it, I didn't know what the hell he was doing, was Ike Haxton. You know, because he's a very similar type mind, you know, and I'd be playing with him in a high roller and he'd look at his cards and then he'd go, and he'd look up the clock. I'm like, what do you think? How's the clock going to help you make a decision here? And I didn't understand it. And then I realized, oh, I see. He's looking at the number because he's thinking if I'm bluffing 30%, if it's a 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to bluff, right? And when I thought about this, and, you know, I worked with some coaches on, you know, doing this myself a little bit, I thought, like, man, doesn't this sort of suck? Like, so, you know, you know, poker's like, shouldn't I just be able to go, okay, well, yeah, maybe I know I'm supposed to bet about 30%, but this guy, he never calls me. I'm going to bet, you know, forget about the percentage. I'm just going to base it on my opponent. Isn't that like at the essence, like that's what drew me to poker? I don't know about you.
Yeah, I really enjoy that part too. Is this because it's constantly challenging and thinking and so on. Obviously, if you just focus on results, you're probably gonna like run better or be better if you have a stronger theoretical baseline. But yeah, I really enjoyed that figuring out part. That was my favorite part about it.
The way that I suggest learning, and the way that I did when I started working with a couple guys back then, was like, okay, it's valuable to know what bluffing percentage should be here, or what is, like, if I was, the way I describe it to people is like, if I was playing against the perfect robot who plays perfect poker, what is the correct move? Okay, the correct move is, you know, bet 80% of the time. But I'm not playing against the robot. I'm playing against Phil Hellmuth. Okay, so I'm playing Phil Hellmuth. He was not quite a robot, although he did tell me years ago when I explained a little bit of GTO to him. He said, I invented GTO. And he was dead serious. He thought he invented it. And I said, no, Phil, you're an exploitative player. He's like, no, I'm GTO. And I was like, trust me, you're not.
He is not. I can confirm.
Yeah. I remember watching a high roller with you too years ago, Super High Roller Bowl, where you played against him, and you obviously, you know, he does his thing and he gets upset, and it's kind of funny and everyone loves it. But like, if you watch the actual meat of the hands you played against him, you played flawlessly against him, like in every single spot, whether you won the pot or not. Like, you got value. I remember with like 2 pair on a 4 straight board, you know, exactly pinning his range. Like, how much time do you study, or did you study like a player like him, or do you not bother? You just be like, okay, I'm going to play my game.
His play, actually, I feel I had his play so nailed down by watching how he played, because I think it's about the complexity of how someone thinks. So I think I see it as players think in logics. So you have a certain logic that you adopt, and then you follow that logic. And the more complex of a player you are, the more logics there are, and the more interwoven there are, and the harder it is to figure it out. So someone like Ike, you know, there's millions of different like thought processes and logics that, you know, were constantly reiterated. And it's just like, you know, like, because he's going to see new theoretical knowledge and he's going to learn new things all the time. But I think less players who learn less or who iterate less, you can get to the bottom of their thought process pretty quickly. And there was just something about the way he played pre-flop, I think I had nailed pretty much down. And then just his general thought process post-flop. And by that, it was just, I think I could have played, like almost without really knowing my hands, because it was just so extreme and radical in the way he played. Like 3-bet, or 3-bet, 5-bet shoving against him was so incredibly profitable. Like I remember, like also obviously because we were talking about it and discussing it, and like Stefan did it as well. And it's just, he was making folds that was so unbelievably ridiculous. With like, I remember he folded queens against Stefan. I think it was Stefan opens, he 3-bets, and then Stefan 4-bet shoves, like ace-5 off or something, and he folded queens. Like it's these spots where you kind of know very well how he's playing, and you just print money against him. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
No, you bring up a good point about logics too. So it made me think about sort of Phil specifically, because I've played with him a lot, and I feel like when I watch you, I'm like, oh, he gets what I get about Phil, and like he has very specific things that he'll do. Right, pre-flop, he has a very, he has a deep belief in, and this is the interesting thing about Phil, is like what he does was very, very effective against the players of the previous era. He was just destroyed them with his strategy. His strategy was, compared to them, very aggressive pre-flop. Like, and you see him do that sometimes, where he'll go in zoom mode, he calls it, where he starts re-raising with 9-3 offsuit and 10-deuce offsuit. He always does it with hands that have no post, like virtually no post flop value. Like he'll re-raise with 10-3 offsuit and fold 7-8 suited, to a button open or something like that.
All the thing is very weird. It's
like
just
the hands that he chooses to do it with, or hands that really should. But then what you'll notice too with Phil is post flop, he plays incredibly passively.
Yeah.
So, like he's checking back a lot of flops. He's making very small bets. And if you look at his history over the last 15 years, you'd be hard pressed to see him raise turn, bet river, and not have it, or something along those lines. So when you have that, and I realized my game too, back in 2004, was very easily exploitable, incredibly easy, if people knew what I was doing or understood how to do it. Back then they didn't. Then kids like Fedor came around and they started going, well, Daniel never bluffs, so why would you ever pay him off? But really, there was a point in 2004 where the strategy was as simple as just raise every hand, c-bet the flop a little bit. If they call, give up. And if you flop something big, just bet big, and they call you. It was just too far too simplified. And it's important for everyone, even you, to always continually like gauge your game and be self-aware and go, okay, what worked for me 2 years ago isn't as effective now. So what do I need to do to be able to adapt? For me, I knew there were several key things, and it actually worked quite well. The adjustments that I did make, being a little less predictable. Ultimately, if everyone knows how you think and play and the logic that you're using, they'll find a way to beat you, right? So you have to like adapt.
Yeah, I think with you, it was very clearly visible too how both sides, how people had a very clear idea of your game and how they were not prepared for you being a bit more aggressive and playing hands a way that you just didn't play them like that before. So I remember especially, I think it was Super High Roller Bowl 17, I think so. 17, was that the year?
I don't even remember.
I just remember that I think you got coached by some cash game players, or like by some players. I don't know exactly who they were, but like it was very significantly visible that you played different than you did.
Yeah,
before.
the very first tournament I played, you were there, because it was me. It was heads up with Dan Smith. It was 100K, and it was a really tough field because there was like no amateurs that played. Kerry Katz was the amateur who's been quite successful, and I ended up getting heads up with Dan Smith, and you were railing Stefan Schillhabel, and one of my guys was railing me. And like every once in a while he'd whisper in my ear, and Fedor would be like this. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, I think these little things where once you identify the weakest points of your game and you're able to fix them, suddenly you can become such a harder opponent. Because like general things like you playing tight pre-flop, that's not the thing that is easy. Like you can't really exploit that. If you fold a bit, or you don't open that many hands, or you 3-bet a little too little, or you don't 4-bet that much, like this is not necessarily something that is so easy to exploit. But when you're not bluffing that much post flop, like that's a pretty relevant thing. But if you start doing that, now suddenly it was like, oh wow, this becomes really tricky.
It's an important thing too. Like It's especially effective when, you know, and I always tell people this, like if you played with a guy a year ago and he sits down and plays with you now, like don't expect that he's exactly the same player that he was a year ago. He may have gotten better, may have changed his game, may have done things, but like so often we see a player and we just think, oh, it's that guy. So he's going to play like X. And then when you come at him with a very different, style of play, it can be very effective until they make the adjustments. That's one of the things I love about poker. It's always like, okay, Daniel never bluffs. Oh, now Daniel bluffs too much. Or no, Daniel, no, he's back to never bluffing again. He's back to bluffing. And it's constant, a guess back and forth.
Until you kind of reach that point where you're pretty well balanced with both. I think
that's the boring part. Balance back.
Yeah. Actually, I want to circle back to how we started, because now there's a lot more people watching. So the big announcement of today was that I'm becoming an ambassador of GG, and we launch our own site. So PokerCode will partner with GG, and also I'm going to drop a sign up link now. If you go to pokercode.com/play, you can sign up your account on our site. You'll have the PokerCode logo and everything in there. You can also join us on Slack, would be really awesome. I'm going to be in there. Our coaches are in there. Our community members are in there. And if you have questions regarding the site, or just in general around poker hands, or want to share something with other people, feel free to join us. We're there for you. And yeah, Daniel, I have to say thanks a lot for your time and joining us. That was really fun to talk some history with you and get more of your experience and your background. What are your plans for the upcoming future? What are you up to for the summer?
Well, here's the thing, right? Because of what's going on, with sort of the lockdowns and the shutdowns, it's tough to leave. I'm expecting, what I really want to do was my plan was before, is I wanted to do some streaming, on GG Poker. But obviously can't do that here from Nevada yet until we get a license, which I'm hopeful for. So it may see me in the summer take a trip to Toronto, so then I'm able to, play a little bit there. But other than that, this will be the first summer in your lifetime, approximately, as we've discussed, that I won't be playing the World Series of Poker because they've postponed it. So it's gonna be the first time where I have a summer to kind of really fit my own schedule. And I haven't really come to terms yet with what that's gonna look like yet. We'll see what, the online, it'll probably involve online poker. We'll see, what GG has in store for July. But yeah, I'm just gonna take it from there.
I mean, for May, we can already say that it's gonna be pretty insane. And I think they're probably not gonna do July smaller than May. I just have that gut feeling. I don't know.
Like 100 million in May is pretty insane. So hard to top that.
100 million. They run $100 million series in May. It's the WSOPC, right? Circuit.
Yeah, the circuit. There's 18 circuit rings. There's about 600 events, some satellites, some side events and things like that, but 18 specific bracelet or ring events, not bracelet.
So I'm going to get into the grind right after this, because I'm hyped to win some rings, hopefully. There's also a COVID charity tournament today, $1,111 buy-in, which a lot of celebrities will play, which is going to be fun. Unfortunately, because I've seen some messages in the chat right now, unfortunately, you can't play from the US, as Daniel just stated. There's also a couple other countries where that are restricted, obviously, regarding gaming law. So yeah, feel free to join us if you can join us. We're going to run a lot of promotions in May and the upcoming months. We have the plan to offer the best support. That's something like around the experience that's really important to us now that other sites aren't really caring about support anymore. Not going too much into detail there. But, I think support is a relevant part of a poker site. So besides that, yeah, big games, fun players, like it's fun site, good software. Yeah, if you enjoy playing online poker, then I think it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, I would say that the one thing that I noticed is like a lot of friends or industry people, like, that they've been giving GG a shot. Like they to a man come to me and they're like, the software is like really good. It's like really an improved experience. It's really interactive. It's like, I guess you could use the term gamified to a certain degree, but like it's important now to compete with other entertainment models. Like people play all kinds of video games and other stuff like that. To make online poker, you know, as sexy and as fun to do, you got to make it fun. And I think they do a really good job of that.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's these little things that I think earlier I would have just turned all of them off, but I think it's kind of nice that there is like the rabbit hole and like
well, now that you're retired, right? Now you're retired.
Exactly.
So
Now that I'm a fun player, it's all fun and enjoyable. No, but yeah, it's basically what we try to do as Poker Code with partnering with GG is just I always would have loved to work closer with a poker site, or where there's actually where you can actually have an impact on what's happening. And I see that as a big opportunity to shape the market and just create a more enjoyable experience. So we're going to try to give as much back to the community by just providing a fun environment, and obviously doing rake chases and leaderboards and promotions and stuff like that. So that's our plan going forward. And let's see how far we've come, and if you guys like it, if you check it out, let us know. Join us in the Slack channel where you can chat with us, and yeah, we'd be very happy if you guys join us. I think for now we have a $600 200% deposit bonus. I think that's what it is, and a lot of other stuff coming up. So yeah, Daniel, thanks again for joining us. Actually, one big thing I forgot. We're going to run a kickoff event where we put up a pretty big bounty on Matthias and my head. So on the 24th of May, let me make sure that this is the right date. 24th of May, we're going to run a kickoff event where I think it's 10K guaranteed. We might put up more to that, and then 2.5K on both of our heads. So $2.5K dollars if you bust me and Matthias. I think that's a pretty sweet sweat, being able to take us out. And we're not gonna play soft, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, you're one of those competitive type people. It seems like you play hard no matter what the buy-in.
I mean, come on, like we can't make it easy. It's like you gotta fight for your bounty.
For sure.
Awesome. Daniel, thanks a lot for your time and you joining us. I really appreciate it. I know it's early in Nevada. And I hope you have a wonderful day, even without online poker.
All right. Well, you good luck with the grind. Go win yourself a ring or two.
I'm trying to. I'm going to dedicate it to the Negreanus.
Always good catching up. Take care, bud.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too.